Millionaire CEO's daughter said just one line, and it left him completely speechless. The mansion stood tall, its windows glimmering under the evening sun. Chandeliers hung from high ceilings, casting golden light across marble floors. To outsiders, it looked like a palace where happiness must surely live. But inside, silence ruled more than laughter ever did. The grand halls echoed not with joy, but with footsteps that faded quickly. Alexander Carter, the man who owned it all, was a figure of both admiration and fear. He was a millionaire CEO, a man who built empires with his mind and willpower. Boardrooms trembled at his presence, competitors respected his name. To the world, he was untouchable, sharp, and in absolute control. Every move he made was calculated, every word precise. But beneath the surface, he carried a wound money couldn't heal. Years ago, tragedy had struck his perfect life. His beloved wife, the woman who softened his stern heart, had passed away. That day, a part of Alexander died with her. The mansion that once rang with laughter turned cold. The walls that once felt alive with warmth grew hollow. Yet life had left him one treasure, one fragile bond. His daughter Lily, only 18, was the last spark of his heart. She resembled her mother in the gentlest ways. Her smile could light an entire room, though she rarely smiled anymore. Her eyes carried longing, searching for something she could not grasp. She loved her father, but she often felt like a stranger in his world. Alexander thought giving her the best of everything was enough. He showered her with wealth, gifts, clothes, luxury beyond measure. But Lily craved something that money couldn't buy. She wanted his time, his arms around her, his voice saying he was proud. Yet Alexander's life revolved around business deals and late-night calls. Work consumed him like fire devouring wood. The more he achieved, the further he drifted from his daughter. An invisible wall had grown between them. To him, it was unnoticeable. To her, it was suffocating. Lily often wandered the endless corridors of the mansion. Her footsteps echoed, reminding her of her solitude. She would peek into her father's office sometimes. The door was always half closed, his head bent over files. Even when she whispered, "Good night, Dad," his reply was distant. "Good night, Lily," without looking up. She carried that emptiness back to her room every night. The mansion was full of rooms, but none felt like home to her. In the dining hall, a table stretched endlessly. Most evenings Lily sat there alone, her plate untouched. The maids served dishes, but the chair at the head of the table remained empty. Alexander often promised he would join her soon, but soon never came. She stared at the untouched chair more than the food. Memories of her mother flooded her in those lonely dinners. Her mother used to sit beside her, holding her hand while Alexander laughed with them. Those days were gone, and silence was all that remained. The housekeepers noticed the sorrow in Lily's eyes. They pitied her, but they could not fill the void. Sometimes she would talk to the staff just to hear another voice, but deep down, all she wanted was her father's presence. She longed for a conversation, even a simple one. She yearned for him to ask about her day, her dreams, her fears. Instead, she received expensive jewelry, new dresses, and luxury gadgets. She smiled politely when he gifted them, but her heart remained heavy. What good was gold when love was absent? What meaning did wealth carry when the soul was starved for affection? Alexander never saw her quiet tears. He believed she was happy because she never complained, but she had learned to hide her emotions, not wanting to burden him. Each night she would sit by her window. From there, she could see families walking outside the mansion gates. Parents laughed with their children, holding hands, sharing simple joys. She envied them, not their clothes, not their cars, but their closeness. She whispered softly, "Why can't we be like that, Dad?" The stars heard her, but her father did not. Inside his office, Alexander stared at glowing screens. Contracts, figures, and strategies demanded his attention. He convinced himself that every sacrifice was for Lily. "I'm building her future," he told himself. But the truth was, he was losing her in the present. His ambition blinded him to her silent cries. The photo of his wife sat on his desk, collecting dust. Sometimes, late at night, he would glance at it and sigh. He missed her too, though he never said it aloud. Perhaps he thought burying himself in work was a way to cope, but that coping came at a price. Lily felt her father slipping away more each day. The mansion that could house dozens felt too empty for her. Echoes of her own footsteps became her only company. She often walked through her mother's old room. The scent of her perfume lingered faintly on the walls. Lily would sit on the bed and whisper her secrets into the silence. "Mom, I miss you. Dad doesn't see me anymore." She wiped away her tears and held her mother's photograph close. That photo was her comfort, a reminder of love that once filled the house. The garden outside bloomed with roses her mother had planted. Lily visited often, tending to them herself. The roses seemed like a piece of her mother still alive. She would sit there for hours, waiting to hear her father's footsteps. But he rarely came. He preferred the glowing lights of the city to the quiet garden. He chased power while she craved peace. He sought wealth while she sought warmth. And the mansion remained divided by silence. Friends would sometimes visit Lily, but they could feel her sadness. They envied her riches, but pitied her loneliness. They left quickly, sensing that no laughter could last in that house. At night, the halls glowed dimly with golden lamps. The air felt heavy, like it carried unspoken words. Lily often walked barefoot through the corridors, listening to the silence. Her heart ached for the sound of her father's laughter again. She missed when he used to read her bedtime stories. She missed the way he held her hand when she was scared of the dark. Now he was always absent, always far away, and yet she loved him deeply, even through the distance. Her love was patient, but her heart was weary. She wanted to scream, but instead she whispered. She wanted to demand his attention, but instead she waited. She believed somehow one day he would notice her pain. Until then, she carried her loneliness in silence. The mansion, though alive with beauty, felt like a tomb of memories. Each corner reminded her of what she had lost. Each room reminded her of what she yearned for. And every night before closing her eyes, she prayed, "Please, God, bring my father back to me." She prayed not for more riches, not for more gifts. She prayed only for love, for the bond she feared was fading forever. The nights in the mansion always seemed longer for Lily. She often found herself sitting near her window, gazing at the world outside. Beyond the iron gates, life seemed so different, so alive. Families walked together, their laughter floating up into the night air. Children tugged at their parents' hands, asking for stories and sweets. Mothers knelt down to wipe away tears when a child tripped. Fathers lifted their little ones onto their shoulders, making them giggle with joy. Lily pressed her forehead against the cool glass, her eyes following them with longing. She wondered how it would feel to have her father beside her like that, not as a CEO, not as a powerful man, but simply as her dad. She dreamed of him walking with her through the garden, hand in hand. She imagined him sitting with her under the roses her mother had planted. A single shared moment, even without words, would have meant the world to her. But those dreams never left the window pane. They never crossed into reality. Each day, Alexander's absence carved deeper lines into her heart. The empty dining table became a symbol of her loneliness. Meals were served like clockwork, but the silence tasted bitter. The clinking of cutlery echoed against walls too vast for one person. Sometimes Lily would take a small bite, then push the plate away. What good was food when the person she wanted to share it with wasn't there? She would glance toward the head of the table, hoping against hope he might walk in. But the chair remained unclaimed, night after night. Loneliness became her closest companion. She tried filling her time with books, painting, and music. Yet even those hobbies felt incomplete without her father's presence. A melody played on the piano sounded hollow when no one applauded. A finished painting felt unseen when no father admired it. She sometimes set her phone beside her, staring at the screen. Maybe, just maybe, he would call her first. But the phone only rang when he sent reminders of money transfers or new gifts. Her heart ached at the thought. Money could never buy love. And yet, Alexander believed he was doing everything right. In tall glass towers, he spent his nights negotiating deals. His voice carried authority. His presence commanded respect. Colleagues admired his dedication, envied his success. They said he was building an empire for his daughter's future. They never knew he was neglecting her present. The boardrooms clapped at his victories, but Lily's silence never reached him. Papers, contracts, and signatures filled his desk. He saw them as building blocks for a legacy. But Lily saw them as barriers keeping her father locked away. Sometimes, while he sat in those meetings, she sat on her bed crying softly. She buried her face into pillows so no one would hear. "Why doesn't he see me? Why doesn't he come?" she whispered. The roses outside her window received her tears as offerings. The moonlight often caught her face, making her look fragile, almost breakable. She longed for the simplest gesture, a smile, a hug, a shared meal. Just one evening together would have eased her heart. But every evening ended the same way, him away, her alone. She remembered the times he used to sit beside her when she was younger. Back then, he would listen to her chatter about school and friends. Back then, he would clap when she danced around the living room. Back then, she believed he was her hero. Now, he felt like a shadow she could never catch. In her loneliness, Lily often created stories in her mind. She imagined him surprising her with breakfast one morning. She pictured him walking through the garden with her at sunset. She even dreamt of him tucking her in again, just once. These daydreams brought her comfort, but also pain. Because when she opened her eyes, the emptiness was still there. Some evenings, she took long walks in the mansion's garden. The roses seemed to listen when she spoke to them. "Do you think Dad will ever notice me?" she asked softly. The wind carried her question, but no answer ever returned. She tried writing letters to him once. Words poured out of her heart. How much she missed him, how much she loved him. But she never sent them. She folded them and kept them hidden in a box under her bed. Perhaps she feared he wouldn't even read them. Perhaps she feared he wouldn't understand. In the city, Alexander worked late into the night. He thought of himself as a good father because he provided everything material. He never realized that love couldn't be wired into a bank account. He didn't know that his daughter stared at her dinner plate, waiting. He didn't know that her laughter had faded into silence. He believed her quietness meant she was content, but it meant she was breaking. Lily didn't want the luxury car he promised her for her next birthday. She didn't want the grand vacation he was planning. All she wanted was to sit across from him and talk. All she wanted was to look into his eyes and see love, not distraction. Sometimes she practiced what she would say if she had his full attention. She would tell him about her favorite book. She would share how she wanted to study art instead of business. She would ask him if he ever missed Mom as much as she did. But when he came home, exhausted, she stayed silent. She feared her words would be dismissed. She feared her dreams would be ignored. And so she let the silence grow. That silence became heavier with each passing day. The house was filled with treasures, yet it felt empty. The echoes of her loneliness grew louder in her mind. She sometimes pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the weight of sadness. A sadness she didn't know how to share. Even when surrounded by wealth, she felt poorer than anyone she knew. Her heart starved for something far greater than riches. Her soul ached for warmth, not luxury. Her mind whispered, "I just want him." The thought repeated itself whenever she looked out the window. The families she saw outside were not wealthy, but they were happy. They had something she longed for, connection. She envied their laughter more than their lives. She wanted her father to laugh with her again. She wanted him to look at her and truly see her. She wanted him to be hers, not the world's. As nights grew longer, her hope began to dim. She feared he would never notice the loneliness she carried. She feared he would never realize that she was slipping away. But still, deep down, her love for him remained. A fragile hope flickered inside her heart, refusing to die. She held on to that hope like a child clutching a candle in the dark. Maybe one day he would set his work aside. Maybe one day he would walk through that door and sit with her. Maybe one day he would listen. Until then, she endured the ache in silence. She let her tears fall when no one was watching. She spoke her wishes only to the night sky. And she waited for the father she missed so dearly. For she didn't want the empire he was building. She wanted him, just him, her father, her only family. Time moved forward, yet the emptiness remained. Each year brought another birthday, but they felt hollow to Lily. Balloons were delivered, cakes were ordered, and servants decorated the halls. But the one person she wanted most was never truly there. Alexander's gifts always arrived, grand, expensive, dazzling. One year, it was a diamond necklace. Another year, it was the latest luxury phone. Another, a brand new car waiting in the driveway. The house sparkled with wealth, yet Lily's heart grew dimmer. She would stare at the unopened boxes long after the parties ended. What good was gold without a father's embrace? What joy was there in cars if no one was there to ride beside her? She never wanted to admit it aloud, but each gift felt like a replacement for love, a poor substitute for the warmth she craved. Her friends often came to her birthday parties. They marveled at the decorations, at the towering cake, at the luxury gifts. "You're so lucky," they whispered, envy in their voices. Lily smiled politely, but inside, she felt anything but lucky. For while their fathers clapped during the candle lighting, hers was missing. He was always caught in another meeting, another call, another deal. "I'll try to make it," he often said. But promises faded into silence, leaving her to cut the cake alone. As her friends hugged their parents at the end of the night, she felt the sting of absence. She went to bed clutching her pillow, not her gifts. The pillow soaked her tears, hidden from everyone's eyes. School brought more moments of loneliness, events farceurs, the auditorium, plays, dances, award ceremonies. Children scanned the crowd for familiar faces, beaming when they spotted them. Cheers and applause filled the room as proud parents clapped for their children. Lily stood on stage more than once, receiving awards for her drawings. Her teachers praised her talent, and the audience applauded. But as she scanned the seats, her heart sank. Her father's chair was always empty. His absence stung more than any failure could. She walked off stage with a hollow smile, clutching her certificate. Teachers told her, "Your father must be so proud." She nodded, but inside, she wasn't sure he even knew. Friends posed for photos with their parents. Mothers kissed cheeks. Fathers patted backs. Lily held her certificate close, pretending it was enough. But it wasn't. It never was. At dances, she watched fathers twirl their daughters under the glowing lights. She sat quietly in the corner, her hands folded in her lap. The music was sweet, but it sounded bitter to her ears. She wondered what it would feel like to dance with her father, just once. To feel his hand guiding hers, to share that moment everyone else seemed to have. But that dream remained a shadow. Even at sports events, she stood alone. She once joined a track race, her heart pounding with excitement. She looked to the sidelines, hoping to see him cheering. The space was empty, and her energy drained before the whistle blew. She ran, but her steps were heavy with sadness. When she crossed the finish line, no one was there to hug her. A classmate's father lifted his daughter into the air, both laughing with joy. Lily lowered her head, biting her lip to hold back tears. Every missed moment etched another scar on her heart, a silent wound she carried with her everywhere. Her friends never noticed. They thought her silence was shyness, but it was grief, layered and unspoken. After each event, she walked home under the evening sky. The driver opened the car door, but the seat beside her was always empty. The Humsumar drive felt endless, the silence unbearable. She often leaned her head against the window, whispering, "I wish you were there." She imagined what it would be like if he had cheered for her, if he had hugged her after the race, kissed her forehead at the awards. Those simple gestures mattered more to her than all the riches combined. But Alexander never realized this. He believed gifts were proof of love. He believed wealth erased absence. He believed she would understand one day. But Lily's heart was learning something different. It was learning what it meant to feel unseen. Each year of missed moments added weight to her soul. She grew quieter around her friends, unable to explain the ache. She learned to mask her feelings with polite smiles. She clapped for others, but inside she was crying for herself. Teachers admired her talent, but wondered about her silence. They sensed a story hidden behind her eyes. Her drawings often revealed what she couldn't say. She sketched families, parents holding children, laughing together. Her art teacher once asked, "Is this your family, Lily?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "It's just something I imagined," she whispered. The teacher smiled kindly, but her heart broke a little more. Home became the place where she stored her trophies and ribbons. They lined her shelves, sparkling in the light. But to her, they were reminders of victories no one witnessed. Achievements meant little when there was no father to celebrate them. She sometimes wished she could trade them all for one moment of love. Her classmates didn't understand. They teased her gently, saying, "At least you're rich." She nodded, but deep inside she thought, what good is being rich if you're alone? She grew jealous of the simplest things. Her friend's father clapping, a mother's hug. Things that cost nothing, yet meant everything. Nights after events were the hardest. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scenes. The laughter of her classmates echoed in her mind. The empty chair in the crowd haunted her like a shadow. She pressed her hand against her heart, feeling the cracks deepen. Each missed moment whispered the same message. She wasn't seen. She wasn't valued the way she longed to be. And yet she never stopped hoping. She believed, perhaps foolishly, that one day he might show up, that one day he would sit in the audience and cheer, that one day he would clap the loudest when she won. But those days never came. And so she carried her awards, her certificates, her ribbons back to an empty house. The maids congratulated her, smiling warmly, but their smiles could not replace a father's pride. The butler clapped politely, but his applause wasn't enough. She wanted one voice, one pair of hands clapping for her, the one that never came. Alexander, meanwhile, sat in glass towers, sealing deals. He never knew the seats he left empty weighed heavier than his contracts. He never realized her victories turned into sorrows without him there. To him, success meant power and stability. To her, success meant sharing it with someone she loved. And every time he missed a moment, she slipped further away from his heart, until she became a shadow even within his own home. The night city glowed with lights, towers reaching high into the sky. Inside one of those towers, Alexander Carter sat in his private office. Papers were spread across the mahogany desk, glowing screens reflected in his glasses. The room hummed with the sound of negotiations happening over speakerphone. His tone was sharp, commanding, every word carrying weight. Assistants stood nearby, ready to take notes, their pens racing to keep up. The deal at hand was enormous, one that would secure millions more to his empire. Alexander leaned forward, tapping his pen, focused solely on the numbers. To him, this was another battle he had to win. Success, power, and recognition. That was his fuel. Outside, the clock struck late into the night. The world slowed, but his mind raced. He believed every hour spent here was an investment for Lily's future. He convinced himself that one day she would thank him. Yet at that very moment, far away, she sat in her room, clutching her phone. Her heart pounded as her thumb hovered over his number. She hesitated. Should she disturb him? Would he answer? A part of her feared rejection, but the ache in her chest pushed her forward. She pressed call. In his office, the phone buzzed on the desk. Alexander glanced at the screen, annoyance flickering in his eyes. He almost let it ring out. Almost. But something inside told him to pick up. "Lily," he answered, his voice clipped, half distracted. On the other end, there was silence at first. Then a soft, trembling voice whispered, "Daddy." The sound caught him off guard. It wasn't the cheerful tone of a child. It was heavy, fragile. He shifted in his chair, trying to hide the unease in his chest. "Is everything fine?" he asked, still glancing at his papers. He expected a simple yes, maybe a small request. But silence stretched between them. Lily clutched the phone tighter, tears brimming in her eyes. She wanted to pour her heart out, but her voice caught in her throat. Alexander frowned, his impatience rising. "Lily, did you hear me?" Finally, her voice broke through, soft as a whisper. "Daddy, I don't want your money. I just want you." The words pierced his soul like a blade. His pen slipped from his fingers, landing on the desk with a dull sound. For a moment, the world outside his office ceased to exist. The men on the speakerphone kept talking numbers, but their words faded. All he could hear was his daughter's trembling voice. His chest tightened as though he had been struck. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The master of speeches, the king of deals, was speechless. A lump formed in his throat, one he had and felt in years. His eyes flicked to the photo frame on his desk, the one of his late wife. Her smile seemed to stare back at him, as if reminding him of what truly mattered. For years he had hidden behind wealth, thinking it would be enough. But in that single line, Lily had shattered the illusion. She didn't care for the empire he built. She didn't crave the luxuries he provided. She only wanted him, her father. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. His hand trembled slightly as he held the phone. "Lily," he finally managed to say, his voice softer now. But she said nothing, her silence filled with tears. He wanted to apologize, but the words were trapped inside him. The meeting on the speakerphone continued, voices asking, "Mr. Carter, your thoughts?" For the first time in years, Alexander didn't respond. He reached out and shut the speakerphone off. The room fell into silence, save for the sound of his own breathing. He pressed the phone tighter to his ear, wishing he could see her face, wishing he could cross the distance in an instant. He closed his eyes, replaying her words over and over. "I just want you." The simplicity of it broke him more than any failure ever could. His empire felt meaningless in that moment. The contracts on his desk seemed like scraps of paper. The skyscraper view outside his window looked empty. He realized he had traded the laughter of his daughter for boardroom applause, and it was the worst deal he had ever made. He rose from his chair, pacing the office. His chest was heavy, his mind clouded. For years, he had silenced his own grief by working harder. But now, her words forced him to face what he had been running from. He thought about her birthdays, the empty chairs, the unshed tears. He thought about the certificates he never clapped for. He thought about the meals she ate alone while he signed deals. Every memory stabbed deeper. He realized he hadn't just missed her life. He had missed her. He stopped pacing and sat heavily in his chair. His head dropped into his hand as guilt washed over him. On the other end, Lily sat silently, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know what he was thinking. She didn't know the war raging inside him at that moment. She only knew she had spoken the truth, even if it hurt. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was filled with unspoken pain. "Lily." His voice cracked, the first sign of vulnerability she had ever heard. She swallowed hard, unable to reply. Her heart pounded, wondering if he would understand, wondering if her words had reached him at last. Alexander's hand trembled as he rubbed his forehead. He wanted to tell her he was sorry. He wanted to promise he would change. but the weight of years of absence kept him frozen. He realized no apology could erase the scars. Yet maybe it could be the first step. He gripped the phone tighter, as if afraid she might hang up. I didn't know, he whispered, almost to himself. Tears pricked the corners of his eyes, something he hadn't allowed in decades. For a moment, he wasn't the CEO. He wasn't the powerful figure the world admired. He was just a broken man, a father who had failed his daughter. The silence on the line was deafening, but in that silence, truth lived. His empire could crumble tomorrow, and it wouldn't matter. What mattered was the fragile voice that had asked for him. He thought of his wife again. What would she say if she saw him now? Would she be proud of the empire, or broken at the distance he had created? His chest tightened further, guilt clawing at him. For the first time in years, Alexander felt powerless. He had built walls of marble and gold, but his daughter's words broke through them, and he had no defense. He sat in his office, the silence pressing down like a weight. He knew life couldn't go on like this anymore. Something had to change. He had to change. But for now, all he could do was hold the phone, lost for words, because, his daughter's voice had left him utterly, completely speechless. The words echoed in Alexander's ears, raw and undeniable. I don't want your money. I just want you. He sat frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. His office, once a place of power, now felt like a prison. The silence that followed her words was heavier than any boardroom confrontation. It was the silence of truth, the silence of years wasted. His chest felt as though it had been split open. For the first time, the weight of his decisions crushed him. Every late night, every missed dinner, every cold excuse, suddenly they all came back. They rose like ghosts in the room, surrounding him. He pressed his hand against the desk, grounding himself. His heart thudded unevenly, a painful rhythm. The line wasn't just a request, it was a plea he had ignored for far too long. His eyes blurred as tears threatened to fall. He blinked hard, refusing to let them escape. Yet they did. A single drop slid down his cheek, warm against his cold skin. He hadn't cried in years. Not when he sealed deals worth billions. Not even when he lost his wife. But tonight, his daughter's voice had undone him. Her words stripped him of every title. He wasn't a CEO in that moment. He wasn't a leader or a giant in the business world. He was simply a father who had failed. His breath caught, jagged and shallow. He wanted to speak, but nothing came. His lips parted, yet no sound left. He reached for the photo frame on his desk. His late wife's smile stared back at him. Her eyes seemed to ask him, "Is this the father you promised to be?" He turned the frame over, unable to bear the guilt. His hand trembled as he lowered it. He leaned back into his chair, staring at the ceiling. The chandelier above glittered, but it felt meaningless. His empire, built brick by brick, now seemed hollow. Every success now felt like failure, because it had cost him the one thing he couldn't replace. His daughter's love. "Lily," he finally whispered, his voice broken. But she said nothing in return. The silence on the line was filled with her quiet sobs. Each sob cut deeper than words ever could. He closed his eyes, tears slipping freely now. He remembered her as a little girl, running to him with open arms. He remembered her laughter when she sat on his shoulders. He remembered the bedtime stories he used to tell, before the empire consumed him. Those memories felt like a lifetime ago. He realized how far he had drifted from her. He had been chasing the world while losing his own child. His hand shook as he held the phone tighter. I didn't know," he murmured, his voice hoarse. The confession was barely audible, even to himself. He had thought he was doing everything for her. He believed wealth was protection. He believed power was security, but none of it had been what she needed. All she needed was him. That simple truth burned through him like fire. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the desk. He felt as though the room was closing in on him. The walls of success now looked like walls of regret. His daughter's voice replayed in his head. "I just want you." Each repetition stabbed deeper. He realized how empty his life had been, despite its riches. He realized how blind he had been, despite his vision in business. He realized how powerless he was, despite all his control. He leaned forward, resting his forehead on his palm. His body trembled, not from weakness, but from awakening. An awakening he hadn't expected, one he couldn't ignore. He whispered again, "Lily, I'm sorry." The words cracked, like glass breaking. They weren't rehearsed, they weren't polished, they were real. And in that rawness, he found his truth. He thought about how many moments he had stolen from her, moments he could never return. He thought about the empty chair at every celebration, the unopened FTS sitting in her room, the silence of dinners she had eaten alone. His throat tightened painfully. He had given her everything, except himself, and that had been all she truly wanted. He rose suddenly from his chair, unable to sit still. His footsteps echoed across the vast office floor. He moved to the window, staring out at the glittering skyline. The city stretched endlessly, glowing with wealth and ambition, but for the first time he didn't feel pride looking at it. He felt emptiness, because not a single light in that city could replace the light in his daughter's eyes. He pressed his forehead against the glass, whispering again, "I just want you too, Lily." His voice cracked, and his breath fogged the window. He turned away, collapsing into his chair again. His body felt heavy, burdened by years of neglect. His mind spun, filled with regrets. He wanted to rewind time, to choose differently, but he knew he couldn't. The only time he had was now, and now he had to make it right. He picked up the photo frame again, holding it gently. His wife's face seemed to whisper encouragement. He closed his eyes, imagining her voice. "Don't lose her, Alexander. She's all we have." A sob broke through his chest, raw and uncontrollable. He covered his face with one hand, the phone still in the other. He knew Lily was waiting, hoping for his reply. He wanted to promise her the world, but that wasn't what she asked for. She didn't want the world. She wanted him. And for the first time, he understood. All the contracts, all the deals, all the accolades. They meant nothing. If he lost her, he would have nothing. His hand steadied slightly as he lowered the phone. "Lily," he whispered again, his tone filled with resolve. His voice, though trembling, carried a truth he had long hidden. "You'll never have to ask for me again." The silence stretched, but this time it wasn't cold. It was filled with a fragile hope, waiting to bloom. He didn't know how, but he knew one thing for certain. He could no longer be the man who left his daughter feeling unloved. The city still. Hell glittered outside Alexander's office window, but he no longer cared. He closed the heavy folder of contracts and pushed it aside. His phone still trembled in his hand, Lily's words echoing in his mind. He knew he couldn't waste another second. Without hesitation, he rose from his chair. Assistants waiting outside looked up in surprise as he stormed past. "Cancel everything," he said sharply, his voice low but firm. They stared, confused. Alexander Carter never cancelled meetings, but tonight he wasn't Alexander the CEO. Tonight he was only a father. His chauffeur was startled when he appeared suddenly in the lobby. "The car, now," Alexander ordered. The doors opened, and he slid inside, his chest tight with urgency. The driver asked, "To the residence, sir?" Alexander nodded, barely able to speak. The car sped through the glowing streets, skyscrapers blurring past. Alexander leaned back, his hands gripping his knees. Every second felt like an eternity. He imagined Lily, sitting alone in her room. He pictured her tears, her fragile voice on the phone. Guilt gnawed at him, but determination pushed him forward. Tonight, nothing mattered except reaching her. As the car pulled into the mansion's driveway, his heart pounded faster. The grand gates swung open, but the house felt different tonight. No amount of light could hide the emptiness he had created. He stepped out before the car even stopped fully. His footsteps echoed across the marble stairs. The butler opened the door, startled by his early return. "Mr. Carter." "Where's Lily?" Alexander interrupted. "In her room, sir," the butler replied softly. Alexander didn't wait another second. He climbed the staircase 2 steps at a time. The hallway stretched before him, quiet and heavy. He paused outside her door, his breath uneven. For the first time in years, he was nervous. Slowly, he turned the handle. The door creaked. It opened, revealing a dimly lit room. Lily sat on the edge of her bed, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her eyes were red, her face pale. She looked up in surprise when she saw him. "Daddy?" Her voice cracked. Alexander's throat tightened, and tears filled his eyes. He crossed the room quickly, falling to his knees before her. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms. Lily froze at first, shocked by the sudden embrace, but then, slowly, she melted into his chest. His arms trembled as he held her tightly. Tears streamed down his face, warm against her hair. "I'm so sorry, Princess," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I should have been here. I should have never let you feel alone." Lily's own tears spilled again, but this time they carried relief. "I just wanted you," she whispered back, clinging to him. He kissed the top of her head, his tears mingling with hers. "From today, you'll never feel alone again." His voice trembled, but his words carried the weight of truth. For the first time in years, Alexander felt alive. Not because of wealth, not because of power, but because of love. The room, once heavy with silence, now breathed with warmth. Lily tightened her arms around him, refusing to let go. He held her tighter, as though he feared she might vanish. The mansion outside was vast and cold, but inside that small room, it felt like home. Minutes passed, but neither spoke. Their silence was no longer painful. It was healing. Alexander pulled back slightly, cupping her face in his hands. He studied her features, realizing how much he had missed. "You've grown so much," he said softly. His eyes burned with regret. "I wasn't there to see it." Lily shook her head gently. "You're here now," she whispered. Those simple words broke him further, yet they soothed his soul. He kissed her forehead, closing his eyes. "I promise you, Lily, I will never let work come before you again." She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. For the first time, she believed him. That night, father and daughter sat together, holding hands. They talked for hours, about small things, about memories. Alexander listened more than he spoke. Every word from her was more precious than gold. He laughed softly when she told him stories he had missed. He cried when she spoke of times she felt alone, and together they began to heal. Downstairs the mansion was silent, but upstairs in Lily's room there was laughter. There was forgiveness. There was love. The walls that once echoed emptiness now carried warmth. Alexander realized wealth had blinded him. He had been a prisoner of ambition. But now, sitting beside his daughter, he felt free. Free from the burden of appearances. Free from the chains of endless meetings. Free to be what he was always meant to be, a father. He squeezed her hand gently. "You're my everything, Lily," he whispered. Her smile widened, and she leaned against him. For the first time in years, she felt safe. And for the first time in years, he felt whole. Outside, the night stretched on, stars glowing softly. The mansion stood tall, but it no longer felt cold, because love had returned to its heart. From then on, Alexander changed his ways. He was present at breakfast, sitting across from Lily. He walked with her in the garden, listening to her dreams. He sat beside her at school events, applauding louder than anyone. The world noticed a change in him. Board members whispered, employees wondered. The ruthless CEO was softer now, but Alexander didn't care what they thought. All that mattered was Lily's smile. All that mattered was the sound of her laughter. The mansion was no longer silent. It was alive, alive with the echoes of footsteps, the warmth of shared meals, the joy of togetherness. Alexander had finally understood the truth. The greatest wealth wasn't in his bank accounts, it was in the love of his daughter, the only voice that had left him speechless. And for the rest of his life, he would never let that voice go unheard again.